Hi, Zizaran here with another video for the Sentinel League, and I wanted to make a video for people playing Detonate Dead. It is going to be a craft the build, so showing how I've crafted my gear or just how to craft some gear upgrades in general. And on top of that, I want to talk about how to min-max the damage of the build. There might be some people right now playing the build and they realize that it's either the most or one of the most powerful builds. They're still struggling for damage, which feels really bad when you see everybody else killing Uber bosses and stuff like that. We'll try to explain everything a little bit more in detail, and if you haven't seen, I do have a build guide for this which will show you all the basics and stuff like that. This is more of an advanced extra thing. So first, let's talk about some of the early things you could fuck up with DD. You should have specters. You should have this specter. Well, I think there's there's two auric ones. I say it in the build guide. I can't remember what the other one is called right now because I just woke up. But I use Auric Colossus. She's gorgeous and lets you do crazy damage. Now, one thing people will ask about, they're like, Zizaran, there are other monsters here. Not every monster is being an Auric Colossus. Have I fucked something up? No. There will be loads of filler monsters. And that means that in Hideout, or in Cortex, or in Invitations, or in Maven, there'll be mostly statues. But in other places of the game, like Shaper, Awakener, etc., there'll maybe only be one or two statues. So then you can sometimes have very little damage. And these specters are a huge part of our damage, so make sure you have them. You don't need to use corpse targeting for attacking them. Something that people underestimate the most on this build is the stat non-damaging ailment. There might be a lot of new players who are like, well, it's non-damaging ailment. It's probably a hardcore thing that people are using for survival. So let me explain what this does to you. Non-damaging ailments is shock, chill, and scorch. So those are three things that are very integral for the build, both for defense and offense, particularly the shock. So now we're in a tier 15 cells, and as you can see, I am shocking for 37 and chilling for 24. That is basically a ton more damage from the shock. You can get up to, I think I had 46 when I had everything in. Another thing that's very important is Scorch. You roll this on boots with the, is it Ember? Yeah, Searing Exarch, so that is the Embers. You can either do what I did, which is a unique enemy, because I feel like I pretty much never need more damage on anything else than actual bosses. Scorch is basically huge. It lowers their fire res, and it's a huge part of our damage. And that means that non-damaging elements is scaling the Scorch, the Shock, and the Chill. And the Chill is also very big, because as you can see, it's slowing down everything massively. Now, if I run up here now, you can see 27 is the Scorch. So it's losing 27 fire res, and then it's getting shocked for 41 and 27. So it's very, very strong. Very, very strong. This is a huge part of our damage. A lot of new players might be ignoring that. Maybe you're sitting there thinking like, well, non-damaging elements is probably some sort of hardcore tank thing. So if that's you, that's bad. You need those. Another thing that's easy to fuck up is your wand. If you're watching this right now and you have a spell damage wand, wave at the camera. That's you. Spell damage does nothing for this build. If you're wondering how to scale the damage, we have multiple stats that are good. We have fire damage or minion damage. They are both the same. If you for some reason didn't catch it in the build guide, it's because of the spiritual aid notable, and that is minion damage also affects you. This doesn't mean we can use the minion damage support gem because that's more minion damage, not increased. But whenever we get, for example, if we use a deafening essence of fear, that's the same as getting 69% fire damage. So this is a very, very high stat. And that makes it very easy for us to get a relatively good scepter. I have some examples prepared for you here. So for example, this is an amazing scepter. Because what we could do here is we can throw a, well, yeah, let's say this scepter, right? Where we have the minions deal up to 56% damage. You could ideally use fear. And then if you do hit an additional suffix on that, that's great. And combine it with something like this. Ideally, what you would like percentage fire damage or percentage minion damage. You do not want spell. And then you want damage over time multiplier, fire damage over time multiplier, burning damage, increased damage over time, or just increased damage is also a stat that would work for us. All of those stats are really good for increasing our damage. I just want to make sure that you know spell damage does nothing for the build. Leveling the Detonate Dead does also not do anything for the damage of the build. That's because we're scaling Ignite, and Ignite is only from one source. And then for the Trigger Scepter, in the initial guide, I have like Desecrate, Life Tap, and Bone Offering. That was really nice. Later on, I didn't have room for that. That is also because I am doing things like Malevolence on Divine Blessing, which I'll show in a sec. That is particularly to get enough damage for the pinnacle bosses while being crazy tanky. So I've done a very, very different setup than the guide. I'll talk a little bit in here about my setup. Mine in particular might be a little bit too advanced for new players because it is extremely hard to get a melding setup. Melding is elemental resistances are capped by your highest maximum elemental resistance instead and minus 72 all res. And that means that I'm focusing on getting 90 max lightning res and then it becomes 90 max cold and fire. And I just have to get a ton of max res. Speaking of, Malevolence on Life Tap Divine Blessing is really, really nice. You will need to use an unset ring for your Tempest Shield. You're most likely not going to use a Purity, but you can still use the setup. That just means that you can pop Malevolence and you will get a nice damage boost from that. It is 20% more damage over time multiplier, so definitely a pretty big deal. You do not need melding for anything on softcore. I will have a separate video talking about like my boss kills and the event and why I built like this. But yeah, it's just mostly for Searing Exarch. Clubs. Important thing to do here is we have while a unique enemy is in your presence, inflict fire exposure on hit. You can have just inflict fire exposure on hit as well. If you get a very low one, you can take the mastery that is like at least 18. But if you get like me where it's 15, then you can do -5 extra fire exposure here, making it 20. And then we have fire damage over time multiplier. That can actually go to 9. Another thing that is really, really good for damage is Essence of Delirium. So normally what I do to roll these, obviously, if you throw one on something and you just hit an amazing ring, it can be on a 2-stone, it can be on an unset, amethyst ring, or vermilion, all are acceptable choices. Or if you're really beefy and you just want to go full ham, opal ring. What I'm actually looking for here is the suffixes. So this ring actually just hit the damage over time multiplier, the lightning res, and the fire. And then what we did next is I did suffixes cannot be changed for 2x, and I did a veiled chaos orb. And then before unveiling, I craft mana. And then it's almost guaranteed that you're unveiling life. So you're basically getting 60 life, which is great, instead of getting, like, you're losing 15 life or something. It is a big deal, but not the end of the world. Getting amulets with damage over time multiplier as well, really, really big. You can get fire damage. You cannot get fire gem level. That doesn't do anything. But damage over time multiplier, fire damage are really good. If you are able to get an amulet with actual unveiled non-damaging elements, that is obviously huge. And as you can see, Ash, Frost, and Storm also has another 30% non-damaging element. So very, very big. I do a Citrine amulet with attributes. It's such a pain to not have to take things like practical application, precision, and dex nodes. It's so hard to fit stats on this build. Thankfully, I got 32 all attributes, which is just pure luck. Honestly, probably my luckiest item out of anything here, because this was an alt regal. Next up, I have a really, really nice max res shield, and I can show you the shield I used before as well. So this was the first shield I used. This was just life, block, fist reduction, and suppression. Obviously, I wanted to make sure that I had 100% spell suppression, but later I was able to get so much spell suppression for the rest of my gear that I was able to pick this bad boy up. And these are actually surprisingly easy to make for how insane they are. And you basically try to get one shield with the +2 all res, which I'm prepping more of here because I'm actually trying to get a better one. So I have one with +2 max res there, one with +2 max res there, and then I'm rolling things like +3 max res, but with another good suffix. So I'm not actually going to use this. I'm trying to get one with like +3 fire, cold, or lightning, and then either fist reduction at level 8 or just a tier 1 res. Maybe I would keep tier 1 block. Maybe. I'm not sure. It would just be mapping protection. So I'd rather have fist reduction. But getting 48 lightning res here would help me out a lot. I'm still pretty tight on res. So, and then, yeah, you just graft them together with query combinators. For afterwards, like, you're most likely not going to hit good suffixes. So then you do suffixes cannot be changed and reforge life. And 2x per try. So that can be pretty costly, but this is also a super endgame shield for melding. Like I said, you don't need that. Just a shield like this is insane and a lot easier to craft. You just spam reforge physical, reforge cold, fire, and lightning. And now a little bit of a mind blower that not everybody knows about. Like, this one has maximum cold resist, but if I do cold to lightning, that actually changes the max res. So you can swap the max res around. This one started as fire, and then I switched it to lightning. My helmet, nothing crazy here, but the duration of ailments you inflict while focused is really nice. You have your corpses down, and then you Val DD, and then after you Val DD, you click focus, and then when you get a actual statue being destroyed by Val DD, the damage of that is going to last a lot longer. Because obviously, we don't have Val DD permanently. We would have so much damage. We would have like 8 million damage or something. And since we don't, we want to make sure that that damage lasts as long as possible, and that's where focus comes in. We do also have non-damaging elements on our helmet, and on the instead of max lightning res here, you can get a flammability curse effect. So now that we've talked about the main piece of gear for damage, let's just quickly go over how to craft the gear. So for the scepter, tier 1 fire damage is incredibly rare. You are most likely never going to get that, so I would settle for anything like 70% fire damage or above. And again, you do have Deafening Essence of Fear to guarantee that. Really, really nice. And then on a second scepter, try to get things like damage over time multiplier, fire damage over time multiplier, or burning damage as a suffix, or fire damage. I would advise trying to have 2, and then you try to recombinate till they have an open suffix, because you do want to craft the trigger. Getting the Harvest Enchant as well for elemental damage is obviously an additional 10% elemental damage, and if you get 30 quality on the scepter by getting more quality from Betrayal, then it would be an additional 5% damage. So it is pretty decent. So very often for crafting my spell suppression gear, there's a few ways I will do it. So here's another example. These already has really good suffixes. So it has cold damage, suppression, and crafted for either focus or for crafting and resist. Now I will either I'll be looking for the mod that says like, I don't think I have one. It's similar to that, where it will be like reforge an item, keeping all suffixes. And then I would just use that until it hits high life. So that is a good way whenever you've already hit perfect suffixes or perfect prefixes on an item. Now, if I didn't have that fire resist crafted and I did keeping suffixes, it could actually add in suffix. It will not add, right? So make sure it is filled. That's why I have that on. Now, let's do another quick example of how I would set up for Reforge more likely, because a lot of people might not know how it works. This was actually a perfect example, which is great. Nice scripted content. I actually did not record this several times. So this is now a perfect boot for Reforge More Likely. So let me walk you through how Reforge More Likely with Harvest works. It is exactly 90 times more likely to pick any of these tiers. They need to be naturally rollable on the item. So an example of something that wouldn't work is, for example, this. I have a Grasping Mail thing on this one. Cover enemies in ash when they hit you. That doesn't naturally exist on a full dragon scale. So if I did Reforge More Likely, it is always going to lose that. It cannot roll it again. However, this naturally has spell suppression. It naturally has cold, fire, and life. So if I do Reforge More Likely, this could go to like 22, but actually not crafted spell suppression. And that's the thing that a lot of people don't know, that it will obey crafted mods. So very, very strong. And you really want to use it on things that are easy to craft or easy to set up like this, right? Like if I used Reforge More Likely on this, it is probably going down to 35 life, and it is losing the +1 fire skill gems. But I don't care if this turns into 35 life and 12 fire res and loses the cold res and the spell suppression. I'll just recraft it. So you use Reforge More Likely, especially to get spell suppression gear. It's pretty much how I get all my suppression gear in a league, and it is from the purple harvest plot. I don't remember exactly what the wording is. Maybe Scrya can just put it in post of what the crafting thing for the purple field is called. But either way, Reforge More Likely, incredibly strong and really, really good for the gear. So if this had movement speed as well, that could be good. Some people like having natural movement speed. I like doing Cannot Be Chilled. And that is pretty much how I crafted all of my gear. My boots actually just alt regaled. I am actually trying to get better ones now, because I think I might drop the Cannot Be Chilled. I don't know. Maybe I'll just swap these for bosses. But having boots with like Chaos Res or an actual Res would help me out quite a lot and free up stuff on my skill tree. But these were just alt regal. Obviously, I just need 2 stats. I just need suppression and life, and then multi-mod. For the implicits, you're just gonna have to farm a shit ton of them. They're all very important on this build. Instead of cooldown recovery and travel skills, you can have Ignite deals damage faster. The Scorch is huge for the build. The fire damage short time multiplier, obviously very good. I'm gonna bless that now before I forget about it. And then fire exposure is huge. You're basically using Wave of Conviction until you get fire exposure on your gloves, and then you can switch to Flame Surge. Now, I initially used Text Touch, but then I saw Steelmage was using Arcanist Brand. Arcanist Brand is miles better. Please use that. It feels great. They have Flame Surge and Flammability on that. Chest. I think I just spammed Greed Essences or Cold Res Essences on this. I have a lot, right? So I think I spammed like 100, 110 Essences. I started playing with Amplified, Crystal Resonance, and Crystal Lattice, and just eventually got it. But I was also doing Reforge Physical. You can do Reforge Elemental and Reforge Life, and just hope that you hit something. Now, for getting suppression easier, especially at the start, you can do pure evasion bases, and they have an easier time. They're actually twice as likely to roll spell suppression as a armor evasion base. Armor evasion is better because obviously we care more about armor than we care about evasion, especially because it buffs our Molten Shell. And for colors of items, like how am I getting so many like 3 off colors, 4 off colors, etc. First, I have it 4-socketed and I do 2 blue. If it magically becomes the colors you want, great. If not, when it's 2 blue and then 1 red, 1 red, then I would do 2-socket, 3-socket, 2-socket, 3-socket, 2-socket, 3-socket, and I would just alternate between these two until the third one appears blue. Each time it spawns, it has like a 5 or 10% chance to become off color. And then on the fourth one, this is prime color, so that's very easy. So then I just do 3-socket, 4-socket until the last one is green. And that's pretty much how I did all my coloring. Did that on my shield, my helmet, my chest. I just spammed 2 blue until I got it. You could also make use of Varishi in research. Another thing that can trip you up a little bit on damage, you can see I have a white socket here on the cruelty. I don't know, I don't bother switching out for normal bosses, but on the pinnacle bosses, since they have 70% reduction, cruelty is not able to get the max amount out of its buff. So I have opted in for doing deadly ailments instead of cruelty from the pinnacle bosses. Really good Watcher's Eyes for damage is damage over time multiplier while affected by malevolence. I would not do the one that is like damage ignites faster on this because, well, we aren't able to always reapply max damage. That's a lot better for explosive arrow, for example. This, honestly, it's just a tank thing. You don't need this on softcore as much. Depends how tanky you want to be. But either way, what it does is when it is Doriani, it will turn corrupted soul, or this thing, into corrupted soul, which gives us a lot of energy shield. And then we get energy shield from melding and from our chest. And another thing worth mentioning, you can see that I do not have the chance to freeze shock ignite here, but I still have 99% chance to ignite, and that's because I got lucky with 4% chance to ignite here. Another thing that can improve your damage a lot is getting the crit enchant on boost. I'll show you what that one looks like. This one, critical strike chance. If you haven't crit recently, that puts you up to like 20 crit, and yeah, you will crit a lot more. So would recommend that for softcore. But yeah, I just wanted to make this video because I know some people felt pretty bad playing a build that they see is clearly the most OP and they don't fully understand why they're doing so little damage. So yeah, it is also still not that insane damage. It's just DD is currently meant to have borderline no damage compared to what it used to. And we're able to get between 3 to 6 million damage while still having an insane defense. And that is what makes it so strong. If it wasn't for the bug, we would probably only have 1 or 2 million damage and the fights would take a very long time and we would just have to dodge forever with our very big tank. And that is why it became such a popular starter, and it doesn't need anything. It doesn't need any gear. So, hope this video helps. Let me know if you like updates like this to the guide, and I'll try to be a little bit more clear in the initial build guide going forward as well, with how to scale the build. So, thanks for watching. Sub if you liked the video, but more importantly, try to die less than I do.